Welcome to the Show Me the Way podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Miller, and I'm so excited to bring this show to you. Show Me the Way is a podcast dedicated to exploring the journeys of those who have faced adversity and found themselves on unexpected paths. We will have meaningful, thoughtful conversations about challenges we have faced and how we discovered and forged new direction. Prepare to be inspired and to uncover your own strength as you listen to relatable and motivating stories. Life has a way of twisting and turning, and we often need a fresh perspective to understand how to navigate. Let's show each other the way. Today's episode of Show Me the Way is exactly why I started this podcast. I met today's guest, Tyler Moon, through a connection site, and after just one conversation, I knew this interview would be something special. Tyler is incredibly well-spoken, grounded, and genuine. He made the entire conversation feel natural, easy, and meaningful. In 2019, while in his mid-20s, healthy and physically active, Tyler collapsed during a 10-mile race due to sudden cardiac arrest. To this day, there are still unanswered questions about why it happened. What followed, though, is a powerful story of resilience, faith, and perspective. Already a man of strong faith, Tyler found himself leaning even deeper into his relationship with God after that life-altering moment. While the experience was incredibly difficult, he chose to focus on gratitude. Grateful to have survived, grateful for a second chance, and grateful for the life he continues to live today. Now a husband and father, Tyler balances a career he enjoys with a growing passion for speaking and storytelling. Through his work on stage and in his writing, he shares a message that has inspired and encouraged so many. His positivity is contagious, his faith is evident, and his perspective is something we can all learn from. This conversation is filled with hope, encouragement, and a reminder of what truly matters. I can't wait for you to hear it and take away something meaningful, just like I did. Welcome back to the Show Me the Way podcast. Today's guest is Tyler Moon. As with a few of my previous guests, I met Tyler on a guest matching site, and something about his story just told me he would have a lot to share and he would be able to teach our listeners a good deal of perspective. Tyler definitely faced a share of adversity back in 2019 when he had a cardiac arrest while running a 10-mile race. He was very active, overall healthy. It was definitely not something that he thought would happen to him, especially at a young age. Tyler shared a story with me on a pre-podcast interview, and I just felt like we had known each other for years. He's a very poised and professional speaker and truly gives us a message we can all learn from. Although I often say this podcast is not a completely faith-based podcast, I do often share about my belief in God, and Tyler and I also talked a bit about this, so I think that's extremely relevant to our conversation today as well. I look forward to learning more about Tyler and his story with all of you as listeners, so thank you so much for being a guest, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I'm happy to be here. It's great. Also
Good.
connect with somebody who's a fellow baseball fan, AL Central fan, so happy to be.
Yes, although I'm very sad about my Tigers right now because they got killed yesterday and the ace pitcher is out for 2 to 3 months, so a little scary about our future, but I'm going to be hopeful.
Yeah, well, we can commiserate at the bottom of the division together. So,
Yeah, there you go. It's
uh,
not like it hasn't happened before.
yes,
We've all
true.
been there. But I'm still going to continue to follow. I'm not going to miss a game. In fact, my family and I are going to a game in person today. So,
Nice. That's awesome.
yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I shared just a little bit. I mean, we talked just for a few minutes prior to this. But again, I did feel really comfortable talking to you right away. I felt like we had really good rapport. So I learned a few things. But why don't you share, in your own words, a little bit more about you?
Definitely. Yeah, and I tell people I'm really just an ordinary guy with an extraordinary story. We'll get to the extraordinary part, but for most people, what I tell them is I'm just like a suburban dad. I work in a corporate office. I'm married. I have one son and another kid on the way, which we're super excited about. And really, my life was kind of normal until about 7 years ago when I ran that race. But to kind of fill you into what I do today, I work for General Mills in the supply chain and logistics and manufacturing. I've been here for about 7 years or so. And yeah, I really enjoy what I do. And then outside of work, we're very active in our church. And we also just love to spend time with our friends and family. So I try to sleep when I can and work when I can and connect with others when I can. And part of what I do is speak and share my story about my sudden cardiac arrest, which we'll certainly get into. And that's kind of a side hustle, passion project that I don't do full time, but I just love to do stuff like this and meet people and encourage folks on their own adversity journey.
Great. That was Perfect. Yeah, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with this podcast. So, I don't know, sometimes you go through sites like that or you just find people and sometimes people just stand out for some reason. So, your story and the way that you're sharing it is exactly what we're trying to do here with the Show Me the Way podcast. So, that is wonderful. So, when is the second baby due?
Ooh, August 5th is the date
Okay.
we've been given. So, yeah, standing today, in this interview, we're about 3 months away, and we're slowly getting things ready again and reminding ourselves what it's like to have a baby in the middle of the night. It's kind of funny how quickly you can forget some of these things.
That's
But
very
we're
true.
excited about it and excited for our older son to have a younger sibling and them to have each other for a long time.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Actually, I came up with a little idea for my podcast. Mother's Day is coming up this weekend, and I decided to interview my mom, my mother in law, and both my sisters yesterday. And it was really interesting having them all on and how they shared, having the babies, what it was like to become a parent, and then siblings. We talked a lot about the siblings and how they react to one another, and I love that part so much. I don't know, my husband's an only child. There's nothing wrong with only children, but I'm really glad that my boys have brothers because it's just fun to watch how they've grown together, how they were when my second baby was born. We used to have to tell the older one, like, don't like hug him too much. Like he needs to breathe. You don't want to break him. So that's what we had to do.
That's funny.
But that will be really fun. Great. Well, yeah, I really like that. Ordinary guy, extraordinary story. I'm sure you're not really just an ordinary guy, but most of us do have stories. I think everybody has some kind of story. Some of them are, yeah, a little more extraordinary than others, but you truly don't know what's going on with somebody until you start talking to them or you start asking questions. And in this world, I think more often than not, we find we're not alone. There are other people that have gone through similar things. And when we start talking about it, it might make them feel better. So I always say if one person listens and gets something out of the story, then doing this is totally worth it. So thank you so much for giving your time today. You can tell that you speak about this quite often. Like I said, very professional speaker. It's just definitely great to talk to you, and I know we're going to learn something. So, as most of my listeners know, and as I've told you, I started this podcast, Show Me the Way, because my younger son, we just talked about our boys, our kids, my younger son, when he was 5, was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I had no idea what that looked like, what that meant. My husband did a little Googling before, but I really didn't know what that was all about. And it just completely changed our entire lives, as you can imagine. I had this plan for us. I had an older son that like was running before he was a year old. He had a soccer ball in his hand, very young age. And I just thought I'm going to have two boys. They're both going to be very athletic. I'm going to have two soccer players. And we just had this whole plan and set for our family. And that just really showed me that, wait a minute, sometimes plans don't work out the way that you expect them to. And that was my first big bout of adversity. Before then, I don't really remember dealing with too much. So I decided that I wanted to have this podcast so that people could share their similar stories. As soon as I started talking about my son, his name is Nathan, about our journey with him, people would say, oh, yeah, I know somebody who went through that, or I went through something similar, or just any kind of time that they had a plan in place and it turned out differently than they expected. And I like to talk. So I thought, let's do a podcast. I really like listening to podcasts. So I thought this was a great way to share the story. And we're on season 2. So I've dropped a new episode every single week since September 2024. So I'm proud of the consistency. I want to keep sharing stories. I want people to keep talking about experiences they've had in life. And I want to continue to learn how to grow in that perspective. So I know that's what's going to happen today. Sometimes the stories are medical diagnoses, like you're going to talk about a medical situation. But we deal with adversity all the time. I mean, you're going to have 2 kids soon, and that's going to be a whole different world, from what what your routine is like right now. So there's always times we have to turn right instead of left or take a pivot. And it's very interesting to see how we react and how we respond and what we learn from that. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let you share your story, jump in with questions if I have them. But yeah, I would love for you to go back 7 years and tell your story to our listeners.
Definitely. And I love how you framed it up too, just how we all face adversity. That's one thing that I found in my life since my cardiac arrest is that everybody has a story. And whether it's a minor thing like you stubbed your toe on the way to get your coffee this morning, or gas is too expensive, or whatever it might be in your life, we all face adversity. And so I really find that we probably can't talk about it too much because there's always things we can improve and get better. And so my story will be a little bit more intense than stubbing your toe on the way to get coffee, but I do hope that it can help you and just give you different perspective on life, how you view adversity. And what I can really tell you is what I speak a ton about to people today is how to turn your biggest adversity into your greatest opportunity. And it seems like over and over and over again, I just find that adversity is really the catalyst to really amazing and great things if we choose to allow it to be that way. In your story and my story, as we get into it, you'll see that there's always ways for us to turn left or right and to look inward or downward or into dark places, or we have the choice to look into positive places, bright places. And so a lot of that we can get into as we start to share this story. But on October 6th, 2019, I found myself at the starting line of the 2019 Twin Cities 10 Mile, which is a race that starts in downtown Minneapolis and goes 10 miles to downtown St. Paul. So the Twin Cities up here in Minnesota is commonly referenced, and it's an awesome race. They target it as the most beautiful urban race in America is kind of their main marketing tactic. And it truly is a beautiful time. Fall leaves, cooler weather, just a vibrant time in the city. And I stood there ready to go on my race day. I'd been training, preparing. I'm a former college athlete, and so I was just ready to go for that day. But unfortunately for me, I did not finish the race that day. I actually collapsed at mile 8, so just about 2 miles from the finish line, and had a sudden cardiac arrest. Like out of the blue, out of nowhere, my race was going very well that day, and all of a sudden, at the snap of a finger, I just collapsed. I didn't know it. I was unconscious for the entire time, but I was basically dying in the middle of this race as thousands of runners ran by me. And a group of people quickly came and rushed to my aid and gave me CPR. So, one of the great things about collapsing in the middle of a race is that there are tons of people to help you. And so, a lot of folks came to my aid. Most of them were medically capable people, doctors, nurses, firefighters, fellow runners, spectators in the race, and also race volunteers quickly came to my aid, flipped me over, and just started giving me CPR. And so it's almost like it's in an episode of ER or whatever it is. Pick your favorite TV show. And I was really kind of the main case study there. And for 10 to 15 minutes, they gave me CPR, and an ambulance arrived on the scene. It weaved its way through the thousands of runners, shocked my heart back into rhythm, and rushed me off to the hospital. So, uh, this is a pretty intense way to start the podcast today, but this is my story, and I'm excited to kind of share more about it. But for me, it kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, I was 25 years old, 3 months away from my wedding day, former college athlete, had been training for this race. And so it really was something that was very unexpected. And we kind of had to pick up the pieces after and really try to figure out what was life going to be like post October 6th, 2019. And we're really proud of where we've taken it from there.
Definitely. So you didn't have any heart conditions prior to this?
No, nothing that we knew of, and we've done a ton of testing since then and with family members. And what I've learned actually is through some of this process, a lot of people have an incident, whether they pass or whether they stay alive, then they do testing on themselves or their family, and they find some kind of smoking gun. There's a heart defect or whatever it might be. A common one that people know about is LeBron James's son. He had a sudden cardiac arrest a couple years ago, and they did some testing and they found he had a congenitive heart defect. For me, I had no smoking gun. There's kind of some thought as to what happened to me, but I still kind of fall into the medical mystery bucket, which is a good thing because my heart is very healthy. Whenever I go do tests, they always just say, "Your heart looks great." Like I'm the simplest heart test in the world right now, and my family's super healthy too. So it really was just a medical mystery.
Did you change things after that? Your diet? I mean, you were already very active.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I think the biggest thing I've probably changed is where I work out, when I work out, where I tell people I'm working out, just out of an abundance of caution. I do have a defibrillator inside of me, so a couple months after I had my incident, I had a implanted defibrillator inside. So we call that my backup plan, and it's always there just in case something happens. But for the most part, my life is generally the same as it was before, just with a whole different perspective on how to face adversity.
Right. Did you spend time in the hospital, like a long time in the hospital after this happened?
Yes. So, well, relatively long time. I was in there for about a week.
Okay.
So I collapsed on Sunday morning around 7-ish, 8 a.m. 8 a.m. It was around 8 a.m. And I was in a hospital in the Twin Cities for 2 or 3 days. And then I was transferred down to the Mayo Clinic for the rest of the week. So in total, it was about 7 days. And most of the time, it was me sitting there, going to and from different appointments, to and from different tests. And then a month later, I had my defibrillator surgery, and I was back in the hospital for another 5 days or so. So I've only spent kind of 2 week-long stints, and then the rest of the time I'm at home, being monitored somewhat regularly by the hospital or the clinics that I go to.
That's interesting to hear you say about being monitored like that. That's really good to hear because actually, interestingly enough, I was talking to a friend yesterday who's a breast cancer survivor, and she was talking about her lack of follow-up. Like they don't require her to go back. And
Mhm.
I thought that after, I mean, you went through a major heart issue, she went through surgery and, all of the treatment. I would think regular follow-up would be standard. So
Right.
it's good to know that they're still checking on you even 7 years later.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Yeah.
actually with my defibrillator, I have, like, a remote monitoring device that sits under my bed, and so every quarter, I have a remote device check where someone in the hospital at the Mayo Clinic checks my device because it's tracking my heart rate all the time, and so they kinda check it on a kind of almost like a maintenance schedule just to see everything's working well, and then I have follow-ups with my doctor every 1 or 2 years. Usually, you want to have less in-person follow-ups because that means you're healthier and you don't have to go back as much. So that's kind of the thought there. But I'm always being tracked. So if something were to happen to me, or if my heart were to trigger some type of alert, the Mayo Clinic would call me almost immediately and try to
Okay.
check in on me.
Well, that's really positive then that you've got that. So after this happened, I mean, it's been 7 years. Have you gotten back into running? Do you still do races?
Yes, I do. I've kind of toned down a little bit in the last couple years, but what's kind of fun about my story is that 27 days after I collapsed, we actually finished the race. So I went and I finished the final 2 miles with my family, and we were
Oh.
approved through our doctor and everything. So that was kind of the start of people were like, "Are you going to run again?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, we're going to run again. Of course, we're going to run again. Why not?" So and I was fortunate enough to not have any, real medical issues, so I could keep running, which isn't always the case for people. But for me, yeah, 27 days later, I ran the race, and then a year later, I ran a marathon during COVID, and it was a quote unquote virtual marathon. Which I'll tell for the runners or the people out there, it's not virtual. It's very real. It's very hard to run a 26
Yeah, you're just
mile
not
race.
imagining it. It
Yes,
really
yeah.
happened.
It's not a video game, virtual reality thing. And then a year after that, so 2 years after my original incident, I ran the Twin Cities 10 mile again with one of the people who had given me CPR. So I
Oh,
kinda felt
wow.
like I tied a bow on that at least, and now I do some 5Ks and just different things here and there, and every once in a while, I'll kinda think, "Oh, maybe I should get into a longer race." And so I kinda go back and forth of that, and I fall back into the ordinary dad of like, "Ah, I'm kinda busy." I don't know if I can do that, but we'll see how that shapes out going forward.
Yeah, I it's very true. We get that in our head or you remember the rush, how you feel when you've completed a race. I used to be quote unquote kind of a runner. I mean, I was nowhere near as fast as those that would get medals or, have the I guess we all get medals, but the finishing places or whatever. But I liked the social aspect of it because I would run with friends and I stopped, I don't know, maybe 5, 6 years ago. And I mean, I'm older than you. I'm just like I'm too old to do that now even though people run until their 70s, 80s, whatever.
Right.
But I have a friend who's like, "I'm gonna get back into running." And I said, "Maybe I'll do it with you." And then the next time I saw her, I was like, I don't know why I said that. I'm like, "I'll
Yeah,
cheer you on," but
right.
it does take a lot. It's a mindset. It's, dedicating that time to training. So, yeah, sometimes it is hard, but I think too when you remember how that feels, it's hard to step away. So,
Yeah, and I think the beautiful thing about fitness too is that usually it's done in a group, and so a lot of times you
yes.
can do group activities and
Mhm.
stay healthy and fit that way, and that was one of the fun things that I actually learned about running. I grew up playing football, basketball, track, a little bit of baseball, and really it is like a team sport, but on the field of football, for example, everything's so intense and you're not really
Mhm.
sitting to chat and talk, and stuff like that. And I'm sure as a more competitive runner, you wouldn't talk much either. But as a casual runner, it's like,
Yeah.
well, I could talk to my friend for an hour
You get
while we're
all
both
these updates,
yeah,
yeah.
working out together. I mean, that's pretty amazing. So I found the joy in doing that as well. And maybe after this conversation, I'll consider joining a race or two. But
Yeah.
it's fun to kind of think about and just experience that together as a group.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you and I talked a little bit about, like I brought up in the intro, your faith and how that kind of played a role. You talked about having something on your bib, so I would love for you to share that story that you shared with me.
Yeah. So, in terms of faith, like I'm a Christian, and I'm excited to share that with everybody today. And I grew up in a faith-filled home, but I probably didn't capture it as my own until I was maybe 22 or 23. I got out into the real world, quote unquote, a little bit, and had a lot of questions about how to face reality and what that looked like. And I just kept coming back to the words of the Bible and was very much encouraged by those things and saw them as reality and truth. And it seemed like the more that I studied it, the more it came to life. So when I was about 23 is when I kind of officially say I became a Christian. And my life really did change after that. And I saw the world in a different lens and have experienced some amazing things since then. So kind of 2 years later, as I'm 25 years old and preparing for my 10-mile race, on the race bib, it's like the piece of paper that you get to put on your chest or your leg or something. I usually can put like a message, or you can put an organization's name or your name. And I decided at first to put my name on it, and it was like Tyler Moon because that was what everybody did, was just put your own name on it. But I was sitting in my car and had just gotten home from work, and for whatever reason, I had this thought, which I now believe for sure was from God and the Holy Spirit, was just this thought that said, "Hey, you should change your race bib from your name, Tyler Moon, to something more about your faith." And then I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like as a Christian, it makes sense to, be bold with your faith, to share your faith, to do it in a non-threatening way, all those types of things. And so I went downstairs into my room and I was praying about it for maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And I had to kind of figure out, I only have so many characters and I only have so much space on the bib. What could I put? What makes sense? And then all of a sudden I had this thought like, oh, I'm going to change it from my name, Tyler Moon, to the words Jesus saves. Like that kind of gets the whole gamut of the gospel, and kind of the important part of the text is in that phrase. And it's a common phrase that you would see on t-shirts or whatever it is in the Christian cultural world. So I went and emailed the person, changed my race bib, and then from there I just like kind of forgot about it. And my hope was, talking about plans, my hope was that, I'd kind of come out of a season where I was learning about my faith and trying to figure out life as an adult. And I was hoping that I could run this race with my race bib and I could encourage people. And at the end of the race, I would just do like a little Instagram post or a little Facebook post and just kind of share about what I had done in my life and what the Lord had done in me and how it's changed a lot of my perspective on things. Because I would say throughout my life, I'm not sure if that message always rang true and always was shared out with people around me. So I had this thought, run the race, I'll post the photo, and like it'll be really cool. The reality is I never posted a photo like that on Instagram. I never finished the race, initially on that day. But what did happen was a week or two after I'd gotten out of the hospital, we started to share my name with local news stations because at the time they couldn't figure out who I was because of HIPAA regulations. So no one could share my name. I was just this mystery guy who had collapsed, and there was a photo of me on the internet, but no one knew who I was. And so over time, we said, okay, let's talk to news, let's talk to reporters, all that stuff. And when my family had initially seen the race bib, they thought it was amazing. Like Jesus saves, and he almost died, and now he's
Mhm.
here. Like kind of this Jesus saves from a macro point of view, that Jesus saved my life. But after some of these news articles came out, we actually learned that one of the people who had given me CPR, his legal name is actually Jesus, which is spelled Jesus. And so once that came online, there was tons of articles. We kind of went from a little local story to a national story overnight, and it got a little bit out of hand because people were claiming some crazy stuff about me being a prophetic person and all this stuff. And really, it was just, like I said, ordinary guy that just decided to change his race bib. And the Lord just really provided. So if you Google my name, Tyler Moon Running, you'll find articles on NPR and Today.com and People and Daily Mail TV, all sorts of things talking about the guy with the Jesus Saves race bib that was saved by Jesus or Jesus. And so it's just an incredible story. And I think it really cements my belief in God and what he's trying to do in sharing his message. And it's also been a great opportunity just to share a message of hope and encouragement with other people.
I love that. And the interesting thing is sometimes you talk to people that go through issues like this or some kind of crazy medical scare, and they might go the negative route. They might think, well, God wasn't there for me. I collapsed. I didn't finish the race. I could have died. But you're turning it into, I was saved. I didn't die. I made it through. I now can share my perspective. So I really like the positive spin on that. And I do think that that's what faith does for us. It allows us to see the light instead of the darkness.
Definitely. And Jesus, I mean, Jesus says lots of stuff, but one of the things he does say is, you will face trouble.
Hmm.
Period. Like
Yep.
that is in the Bible.
Yep.
But what's great is he follows it up with, "But do not lose heart, for I have overcome the world." And I think that that's the reminder that we have of people of faith, is that we will face trouble, and Jesus will always be there. And really, the reality is death isn't the end of our story as people of faith. And so I think oftentimes we see death or even medical issues as like, oh, everything's terrible. And it's like, no, no, this isn't the end of our story. This is just one part of it. And we're part of a greater plan and a greater opportunity to share the gospel. And so it can be certainly hard and difficult to go through challenging things. I don't think the Lord would ever want us to be in pain or be hurt, but that's just part of life, and that's just where we're at with society today. So to be able to turn really hard things into beautiful things is all what the Lord is all about. That's what he's done from the beginning of time. So it's fun to be a part of that story and fun to turn that perspective around. And from my experience and just from my learning and teaching is that people typically, when they have this mindset of faith and seeing kind of this adversity as opportunity, truly do handle things so much better than the other way. And I think you can kind of see it as people evolve and grow.
Yeah, very good perspective. You're making me think, well, a couple things. One, when you share that story about deciding to put Jesus Saves on the bibs, on the bib, I call that a God wink. I have a friend who I was on her podcast. It's actually called the God wink. And then I've shared it many times throughout this show that there's just times in life you just see God. It's just clear. Like it just, you just see the message or you feel the message, and that's a perfect example of that. And the other thing is you really gave me good perspective on a friend who recently passed away. She's been on my mind, so it's probably why I'm bringing it up today. But I was in a Bible study with her, and she was probably one of the most faith-filled persons I've ever met. And when I met her, it was in 2020, and I was having a lot of questions, and I felt like I was very far from a relationship with God. And I met her, and I can't even begin to tell you all of the things that she taught me. And I always looked at her as like a disciple. The
Mhm.
way that she spoke, I mean, just like you spoke, she would read scripture, she would share scripture. She always had like the right verse to share with you at the time you needed it. I didn't know her for very long, but she really truly impacted my faith journey. And she recently passed away. She was only 55. She had breast cancer and then it morphed into cancer throughout her whole body. And I just keep questioning, like, why her? Like, she has so much more to share. But you're right, her story is not over. She
Mhm.
is now serving another purpose. And so I really appreciated you sharing that perspective because that brings even more positivity to my remembrance of her and my
Mhm.
memory of her. So thank you. Yeah, like I say, this is not, I haven't said that Show Me the Way is all about our faith journeys, but I will say that the way that I came up with the name was that, and I kind of said sometimes people, when they go through adversity, they question things or they look at the negative. And I grew up Catholic. So I always went to church, but I didn't really feel like I had this relationship with God. And when my son was diagnosed, it was like, what's going on? Like, I don't understand. He is 5 years old. Why would this happen? I'm the one that has sinned. I'm the one that should get some kind of disorder or something happening to me. Why him? He's done nothing. He's innocent. I had a lot of questions. And I just really needed to kind of change that mindset.
Mhm.
So I would pray, show me the way, show me the way, show
Mhm.
me the way. I feel like I'm far from my path. I believe God has paths set for everybody. And I don't feel like I'm anywhere near it. Maybe my pinky is like holding on to it, but I don't feel like I'm close to the path that I'm supposed to be on. Show me the way. I've learned since then that you got to do a little work yourself, but that was always my phrase. So even though I say this is not necessarily a faith-filled podcast, like that's where the name came. So I appreciate you sharing that and just telling us how how to see that light. I really like that you went in that direction. So tell us more about, yes, you do have a full-time job and you have a family that you have to support, but tell us more about your passion for speaking.
Definitely, yeah. So when I had my initial incident, I wouldn't have said that I was a public speaker by any means. I certainly can get in front of a group and do that type of stuff. But really what happened was after my incident, people just started to reach out and ask for, hey, could you, do this? Could you do that? And it just felt like it was really an outpouring of the opportunity for me to share this message. And so I slowly just began speaking at little events, mostly Bible studies or small things that people asked me to go do, and I would just help them talk about adversity, talk about my story, and it really just started as me doing something as casual as this, not really planned. I did the best that I could with what I knew how to do, and then over time, what I learned is that people just really loved the story, and that there was really nothing that was more impactful for me to do than to give them my story and to give it in a way that was easy to understand with a teaching point. And so over time, I think I just really loved the few minutes I was up on a stage, the 15 minutes, the 20 minutes I could just share it, and to see how people would process it and ask questions about it and take it back and really chew on it was just something that was incredibly enlightening and also fulfilling for me in a way that my corporate job, as much as I love it, doesn't always give that same vibe. And so it was really cool just to see it slowly build in me. And as I feel like as I began to love it more and see the fruit from it, I also began to want to get better at it and to share my story in a different way, in a creative way. And I would say most people are pretty surprised when they see me on stage, with hand motions and gestures and all emotional in a certain sense, because that's not who I am on the day to day basis. But I really do feel like it's part of my gift and some of the teaching skills that I've learned over time. So in 2019, 2020, I kind of started to do some of those small things, and the world shut down in 2020, as you know. And then 2022, 2023, I kind of reemerged doing some more smaller events. And now in 2024, 2025, and 2026, I've started to do a couple bigger things, more paid events, corporate, and also church and faith-based things. And it's been really fun just to be able to share the story with people. And then more recently, I wrote a small devotional book, a short book that it's been pretty fun to share. That kind of captures my best messages. It's kind of my greatest hits album at this point in time in my career. And that's been really fun to share with people because I had a thought and realization after our son was born. I was speaking a little bit, and I had this thought where I'm like, "Oh man, I'm exhausted. I'm tired of speaking and being a dad and parenting and all that stuff like that." And I realized I couldn't go and speak in every town I wanted to go speak to and every person and student I wanted to see. But a book does have that opportunity. Somebody in Idaho or somebody in Michigan or somebody in Washington D.C. that I would never meet, and I might even not even be here on Earth, can possibly read that book one day. I mean, that was super exciting to me. So the speaking has kind of morphed into this book, and we don't really know what's going to happen next with my speaking and passion journey, but it's been really fun to at least share a message of hope and encouragement because as far as I can tell, I don't think people need any less hope and encouragement in their life. So
That's
we're going to
very
keep
true.
pounding that drum as long as we can.
Yeah, I appreciate that. What's the name of the book?
It's called More Than a Conqueror. It's based off of Romans 8:37, which talks about through Christ we are more than victors or more than conquerors, and it really is about adversity. And if we face it the right way, and if we look at it in the right light, and what I believe the right way is with God, is that we can be more than victorious, which is a just an amazing verse in the scripture that I feel like I always meditate on and think about because as we talked about our teams, twins and tigers and whatever else, it's hard just to be victorious. But with Christ, you can be more than victorious. You can be more than a conqueror. And so the story kind of goes in and out of things we've already talked about today. My story, a little bit about teaching, a little bit about sin, a little bit about destruction, like all these types of concepts and what we do with them. And it really kind of hopefully is a good way for people just to dip their toe into the waters of what is adversity and what does a life of faith mean and how do I mash those two things together, because as you've already said, that's one of the hardest things for people is like, why do bad things happen to good people and how would God do that? So we kind of touch on a little bit of that stuff in the text, and it's just been really fun to see how the book has gone and the speaking has gone out to the world.
That's great. That's great. My son Nathan, the inspiration behind this podcast, was a guest a few weeks ago. He's been on twice, so I'll have to go back and listen to him talk because he tells the story in his words, which I really like. And he talked about, it was very interesting. He said, I think things happen for a reason. And you've heard that phrase. Everybody's heard that phrase. When he was first diagnosed, I hated that phrase.
Mm,
I'm like, what do you mean everything happens for a reason? Why? Again, going back to why would a 5-year-old be diagnosed with this progressive muscle wasting disorder? He used to be able to walk. He can't now. It's just going to keep getting more difficult for him. Instead of born with it, he remembers what it used to be like. And
mm,
so I just didn't understand that. So when people would say, well, everything happens for a reason, I would get angry. I did not like that. But it was interesting to hear him say that because since it's been 11 years now, so since then, I really have grown to understand that and probably more in a faith filled way that there are reasons behind things. And sometimes we don't understand those reasons. I don't fully understand why my friend passed away at age 55 when she is such a disciple and had so much to teach everyone. But there are reasons. And it was great to hear him say that. So, yeah, it sounds to me like you've been able to find purpose and reason,
mhm.
not why you had this cardiac arrest. There's no medical, they didn't say, oh, well, you have this disorder.
Yeah,
That didn't come out, but there are definite reasons, and sharing is one. But yeah, I would love to hear more of your perspective and after that moment, how your perspective has changed.
definitely. Yeah, I think that a lot of times people say, did your life radically change after you had a cardiac arrest? And part of me is just like, no, it didn't. No, I'm sure there are things that maybe changed a little bit, and I say that sometimes because I think as a person who's filled with faith, you would hope that you live your life in a similar manner regardless of your external circumstances. But what I will say is it has opened my eyes up to um, things like this, the hardships that people face. I think I used to just kind of say, "Yeah, that's life, hard things happen and you just move on." But now I think after going through it, after being the person in the hospital bed, after experiencing the trauma that your family experiences in some of these things, I do start to have a different ear and a different eye for some of the hardship that people face in life and try to come and fill a need or fill a void that I might see at any given time. And sometimes that can be doing a meal on a meal train or, dropping off groceries or whatever it might be. For me, I really do think that it's been that speaking lens and being able to share it because I just recently was at a conference last week and there's 200 people there. And it's like, there's got to be at least one person that's had something hard happen. I mean, talk about people who have passed away. At least one person had someone they love pass away that week. At least one person had a diagnosis of somebody that they love that week. And so I think what I've hoped to do with my speaking is to be able just to walk into a room like that and provide hope and encouragement to people who are really like in the middle of something like that. And what's fun about it too is with somewhat, scripture based or not, there's just so much research and teaching about how to face adversity and what it does for us. And typically, when I talk to people about it, I talk about our mindset's kind of the first place that we start. So, one, resiliency is actually a choice. We all have the ability to choose whether we want to be resilient or not. We don't always think that in the moment, but it's true. We have a choice about our attitude and our effort, and those two combined actually help us become resilient. And then after that, I talk a little bit about just our mindset about, do we see adversity as an opportunity to grow, or do we see it as an opportunity to quote unquote, get out? Do we just want to get out of it wherever it might be? And so that's always a fun place to start with audiences and just get their wheels spinning on the little and minor ways that they're trying to get out of some of the hard things in life, whether it's a rainstorm on an important day or gas being too expensive or whatever it is, and how that quick shift of your mind can really just help you uh, change how you start from a certain point in time and build your adversity muscle.
Oh, I like that. Adversity muscle. Got to write that down. um, you know, I've brought this up a couple times on the podcast, I think, too. My son, again, back to him, you're reminding me so much of him. He's 16, so typical. Maybe empathy is not the most important word in his vocabulary,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to focus on that because people do so much for him all the time. I mean, he needs constant physical assistance.
Mhm.
So people are at school helping him get his books out of his bag. Friends are constantly helping him, like open his lunchbox, whatever they're doing for him. And we're constantly, my husband and I and his brother are constantly doing things for him. And I don't know that he often shows this like thankfulness or respect back to people that do these things for him. It's almost like, well, here I am. You better help me. And so I told him recently that he needs to work on the word empathy. And he's like, I don't even know what that means. But what you just talked about kind of helped me think about that because you're right. Like, you notice a little bit more like, wait, that person needs assistance. I should sign up for this meal train or like things I might not have thought about before. Now you're like, people help me. How can I help them? So I would love to hear your thoughts on empathy and how I can teach him. I'll have him listen to this.
Well, it's funny because that's one of the things I'm not great at, honestly, and I think that's kind of been a journey for me, 'cause I grew up in a just a culture of sports where it's like either you kinda get over it or you don't perform, and for most of my life, that thought served me very well. Into my 20s, it was just like, "Hey, this coworker is a problem. I don't care. I'm just gonna solve my own problem and do my thing and get going," and I would say for the most part, maybe 80% of people's lives, you can do life that way,
Mhm.
but you're missing a whole gap of emotional connection and emotional, depth within yourself and with other people if you don't have that empathy muscle, and so for me, sometimes I think there's as a teaching person, as I think about my own 16-year-old self, I probably sat in the same camp as Nathan, trying just to be like, "Why do I care? I don't care about anybody else." But there's typically a point in time for me where it just, like, becomes clear.
Yeah, I like you talking about that because it is kind of an interesting word. And the fact that he's like, I don't even know what it means. And then I was trying to describe it. But yeah, I think there is a little bit of a thin line because you don't want to go over the top and do things for people all the time and never think about yourself or never focus on yourself and taking care of your needs first. And I know a lot of people like that, a lot of moms like that, that put themselves completely last. I wouldn't want you to completely go that other way. So it is good to say, wait, this doesn't affect me. I need to focus on my own self at the moment. But if people do things for you, I like the idea of serving or giving back. So trying to teach him that a little bit more. So
Right. And if you bring it back to the faith-filled lens, Jesus was asked what the most important commandment is, and he says, "Love God and love your neighbor as
love your
yourself."
neighbor. Mhm.
And it's funny because the person who was trying to quiz him didn't ask for 2, he asked for 1, but Jesus said, the second one is of equal importance." And so I think that's always a reminder for me too about empathy is loving your neighbor can look 1,000 different ways. Empathy is one of those things that can definitely fill that void, and it's something that I can certainly grow in. My wife has taught me a lot in that space about how to be empathetic, but part of that is being just on the journey of learning and growing, and through adversity, talk about some of the fruit that comes from adversity. I think empathy can be one of those things
Mhm.
where you can step out of it and say, "Oh, actually, someone was empathetic towards me, and it's created such a great, moment in my life. I'd like to do that for my neighbor as well." And so definitely some opportunity there for me and Nathan, and
And
hopefully
Nathan. Yeah, and that's a good point because my husband, who I already said was an only child, often when I first met him, often thought, okay, this is the only person I need to worry about. Myself, myself, myself. And dealing with adversity, again, not that I wanted him to have to deal with a son that was going to have this condition, not that I wanted him to have to do all this physical support for his son, but it really has taught him to look out for others way more than he did when he was younger, and he's so good at paying it forward. He's so much better than me. He'll be like, "Oh, I went through a drive-through today and I bought the person ahead of me's lunch," and or I saw someone I knew at a restaurant and I took their bill and paid it. Like, he's really good at doing that. Pay it forward is a big thing for him. So I do think it is something that you can learn and grow into. And we're older than you, so you're going to keep learning, but it already seems like you've got it kind of figured out. The other thing you brought up is a good segue. So in season two, I mean, we talked a lot about it in season one too, but in season two, I wanted to focus more on our tribe and our support system. And you had a lot of empathetic people on the race, like runners that were feeling good, having good times. And then they were like, wait a minute, I have to stop and help this person. Volunteers coming to help, the ambulance. I can just picture the whole scene getting onto that racetrack and getting to you. I mean, that would be so difficult in the sea of people. So you had all these people that dropped what they were doing to come help you. So that's one group of support that you had. But I would love to hear you talk more a little bit about your support system, your wife, your family, like how people came through when you needed them.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think part of my speaking is a little bit I talk about how to prepare for adversity before it happens. And there's a little bit of a framework that I talk about, and it's an acronym and GROW. And the O of that framework is actually being open to help. And that's a big part of it. And so that one's all about when I talk about it, it's really actually about one, like myself being open to admitting my need and desire for help, and then actually allowing people to come and help me, which is, as I've thought about it, reflected over time, I think about my time just living in the Midwest. You have like a party or a potluck or something like that, and everyone always wants to bring a dish. Everyone always wants to show up with something. But when you're the host, sometimes it's hard to ask people to bring stuff because you're like, well, I don't want to, burden anybody or make anybody upset. And I think that's just kind of how we walk through life sometimes, is that we always want to bring the casserole or the hot dish, but we don't always want to accept it. And so when I think about being someone who has a tribe, I think the first thing is just being able to admit our need for help and our desire, which is really uncomfortable because it makes us feel vulnerable. It makes us feel like we can't do everything. And what I like to gently tell the listener today is you can't do everything. Like that's the whole point. Like we couldn't do everything on our own. We're not meant to live in isolation. And the sooner we realize we can't do everything on our own, the better off we'll be. And so when I think about my tribe, people that have supported me, my wife, certainly she was my fiance when my incident happened. So she stepped up, in huge ways before we even said I do. My parents, and then tons of different friends and family over time who entered into my life. And I could have probably sat in the hospital room and said, no, no visitors. It's just me. I'm just going to sit here and kind of figure it out myself. But I knew better than that it really, even having somebody there for 5 minutes or 10 minutes to say hi and tell a funny story, or to give my wife an hour of break to go get a coffee and sit by herself, was really the kind of the most important thing for me to do at that time. And so being open to that help and being willing to do it is something that can be hard to do, but you can practice that even today by just like asking your neighbor for something. I've started stopping ordering things from Amazon the minute that I think of it, and just going to my neighbor first and saying, "Hey, do you have this XYZ tool, or I need some printer paper. Can you help me with that?" And part of the reason I've started doing that is because I want to help build a bridge and relationship and also build a skill set. And what I found over time is that when you ask people for things that you truly need help for, you'll find that the same people kind of keep popping up in your life. And then you can start to, rely on those people for actual, big issues that come into your life. And then vice versa, they start asking you for things. So the minute you start kind of connecting with people on that more vulnerable personal level and asking for help, people start to ask you for help. And then you start to build a relationship that when times get tough, you can really lean on people and rely on people. And that's been completely true in my cardiac arrest and even just as a normal, regular adult. And I hope that's something that people can kind of cling on to. And usually it doesn't start by being the person that's always the helper, but being helped. And so that's kind of an interesting technique that I've learned over time.
Yeah, I like that a lot. You are spot on that that is very difficult early on with my son. And keep going back to him, but you're bringing up so many points that are relevant to me. It was very hard for me to ask for help. My husband and I started an organization called Nathan's Ninjas, and we have a couple of events, a family fun run, a golf outing to raise money. And one of the main reasons we did is because people kept saying, "What can we do for Nathan? What can we do for Nathan?" And so we figured out how to set up this nonprofit where a lot of the funds that were raised could help him with home and vehicle modifications and things like that, and help other families. And so it just really gave these people an outlet because people want to help. And a lot of times when you say, "No, thanks, I'm good," then they feel like, "Ugh, I really wanted to do something and you kind of deflated me." So giving people that opportunity is really important. And you're right, a lot of us, especially I'll go back and call out moms again, will say, "We've got it all. We don't need any assistance." And it's like, you do. You can't do it all alone. So I really liked that perspective. We always need people. People need people. In 2020, I think it was so difficult for, especially me, I'm quite the extrovert, to not be around others and to not have people around you all of the time. And I just think that God did not intend us to do life without each other. So, very good perspective on that.
Yeah, and I think the truth with being helped is it doesn't diminish your identity, it doesn't diminish your value. Certainly we can get to a spot where we become maybe overly needy and you can, manipulate people. But I think as an adult, you would kind of know, we're not kids anymore, where I hope people kind of have that mindset. But the reality is just because you ask for help, like just because I asked for printer paper from my neighbor, which is fresh in my mind, it doesn't mean I'm just like not a good planner or I don't know how to run a business or, I don't think so. I think it just means I ran out of printer paper. I needed some help. And so I
Right.
went down the street and got some printer paper. We had a great conversation. We laughed and, we know they're going to Dairy Queen. We learned their favorite order at the restaurant and we just had a good time. And now I came back. And so I think it's kind of like those little things where it's just reminding ourselves that asking for help doesn't diminish our own value. It actually probably enhances our value because we're more emotionally aware and stable with being able to ask for help. And vulnerability, Brene Brown is one of like the key, leaders in terms of emotional health and things like that. She always talks about vulnerability is always the doorway into something deeper. And really, you don't really get that emotional, vulnerable state unless you bring yourself to that state yourself. And so there's a lot of rich and fertile soil. If people want to go down there, there's lots of great opportunity there. And hopefully you can be encouraged that asking for help doesn't mean anything against your own identity or your own value. It just means you need help.
Yep. Perfect words. Yes, I couldn't agree more. Well, before we end off, I usually allow my guests to share. You have shared so many, I say this all the time, nuggets. I had a previous guest who said, always leave nuggets everywhere you go, nuggets of information. You certainly left a lot of nuggets for us. But if you were to give one more piece of advice or one more bit of perspective to our listeners, what would it be?
Man, that's a great question. I do feel like it's been a nugget. Hopefully, it's a nugget filled
Yes.
chicken nugget, golden nugget, or something filled episode here. But for me, I really do think that it's this adversity doesn't always have to be bad. I think over time, we've really, as a culture, as a society, I'm to blame as well, as we see this problem and we think like, oh my gosh, my life is over. And that maybe is part of our fight or flight response or whatever it might be. But I would just ask people to pause for 1 minute and just look to see the opportunity. Don't just allow to take the easy path, the wide path. Like, don't just step down into that. Actually, sit there and think about how this adversity can become an opportunity for so much more. Think about, I was talking to somebody the other day about all the different organizations and things that have been created over time, Nathan's Ninjas included. I mean, that would never have been created if you didn't have adversity. We have so many wonderful things that are happening in our world today because of adversity, whether it's a business frustration or a personal frustration. All that adversity does truly create something beautiful
Mhm.
if we allow ourselves to be taught and to be coached in that way. I certainly think faith is a big part of that for me. It doesn't have to be for everybody, but I would encourage people when they're in that adverse moment, if you can just take 30 seconds or a minute just to think, what is the opportunity here? Truly, what is it? I think you'll be better served and you'll be bringing a different impact, a positive impact to yourself, to your neighbor, to your family, to your community, to your work, if we can just take a minute and pause. So that's the nugget I'll leave you with today, and hopefully it can serve you well.
Yeah, that's a great nugget. Yeah, golden nugget, we'll call it. Well, yeah, I definitely wanted to touch base on pretty much everything that you brought up, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I think a lot of our listeners can learn from it. Yeah, you had a cardiac arrest at a very young age, doing something that you enjoyed, and you're very active. You did not have this background that would make you think anything like that would happen, but you certainly did take that moment in time, and it doesn't tell your whole story. It was like a leaping forward point to share and to allow others to gain perspective. And I truly appreciate you sharing it with all of us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for the Show Me the Way podcast. I truly appreciate you tuning in to today's episode about overcoming adversity and finding your path. I hope it brought you new insights, empowered you with perspective, and inspired you to find joy in your journey. If this episode touched your heart, don't forget to leave a quick review as it will help us reach and motivate more people. Until next time, keep seeking the light and showing the way.